Hey guys, the live stream today, franchise sales chaos. And the question is your pipeline, is your CRM, is your franchise sales process, is it costing you growth? Kelley, this is a big topic. And I mean, everyone works so hard, franchise their business, build a franchise system. And for any business, sometimes it just feels like, how do you know if you're off track, if you're losing out on deals, if you're not converting the right way? And so today, I think a good formula for us to cover for today is, you know, like the chaos. How do you know what's broken? We could talk a little about brokers versus in-house, get a little CRM pipeline fixes, talk about ideal franchisees, realistic sales goals. And then at the end, Kelley, I'm thinking, like, what are 3 foundational fixes that every franchisor should be thinking about when it comes to sales process? I know it's so many things, but it's going to be a fun Friday, Kelley.
It is. I'm excited. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So guys, and by the way, Kelley's leading up the growth advisory on our team. And for our clients, always feel free to reach out. So Kelley, let's frame this, right? Successful franchisor, you're growing your franchise system. What are signs that you're losing deals on your franchise sales pipeline? How do you even know if you're in chaos or doing on the right track or wrong track?
Yeah, that's a good question. I would say the franchise sales is the best part and worst part of being a franchisor. It brought me the most joy, but also the most heartache. And I think the first place that it breaks is before the leads ever get to you. And I think, it took me a long time to really realize that, my pipeline was broken and that it was empty. And a lot of that was, which we've talked about before, and I encourage people to look back or look at our next Fran Camp for some motivation. But it's like creating that brand story and making sure you're getting the story out to the right person first. That's where the pipeline starts. And I think, a lot of people are like, hey, why am I not closing deals? And it's probably because the right deals aren't making it to you in the first place.
And that's the fascinating part, because when we're speaking with clients, you'll hear different stories of, we had a lead or we had a candidate that was, super interested, great fit. And then for some reason at the finish line, we lost them, or they'll claim it was some type of home issue or personal issue. Some brands feel like, they'll go to broker conferences and other things, put in great efforts, have great feedback, but not see, good quality referrals. So, I mean, aside from a lack of deals, what are signs that, or sort of a forecast of, hey, if you see some of these warning signs, your pipeline could go dry or you're not on the right track?
So I think some of the biggest things that I saw are, first is brand, like people showing up to their brand that aren't aligned. If they get to me and they're not really sure what we're offering, or they're not really sure what our culture or our mission is before they get to me, I've missed out on some opportunities to educate people about the brand before they get into the pipeline. But then I think you find yourself in this cyclical, thing of trying to make them fit in the brand versus making sure the brand fits for them. And so, I think there's a huge part of, brand education that has to go in first to make sure you even are getting the right people there to start talking about the brand and moving them through. And, and I think the same thing happens when people are falling out. It's, there's a few things that I think happen. One is brand doubt, right? Again, have you told your story well enough that you've taken a lot of these doubt elements out that people are going to have when they're looking at this sort of investment? And time gaps. They say time kills deals. And with franchising, it certainly it's a longer sales process, but there needs to be a lot of touch points. There needs to be communication, whether it's pre-generated and you have automations if you're, small and can't manage that communication. But keeping someone engaged with new content is a really important part of that process. And I know we've seen that with quite a few of our brands that are really successful. A lot of that's because of that constant content that's going out.
Kelley, I mean, without just as a general overview, when you think about those perfect fit franchisees where you're like, yeah, the process really worked, just as a reference point, how would you do, like, what did your process look like and things that were working that made you feel good about it?
So, I think how I would always kind of gauge success in our process was in engagement. How much is the prospect engaging back with us? It shouldn't be a one-way sales process. This isn't like we're selling someone a car and they disappear. It really should be a two-way road. And so for me, I would say, hey, we're doing this right when we're having lots of conversations, when the potential franchisee is engaging back with us as much as we're engaging with them. And that's hard to do, in the beginning. And, I'm a big believer of doing a lot of this in-house and using your entire team as part of that process. But I think that's when you're doing it right, is when someone is engaging in conversation about the brand and about the possibilities, instead of just waiting for you to keep pushing, sales type material at them.
What are some like questions or engagement that you would hear from franchisees that are those signals that they're engaging the right way?
Some of those would be, we would give them assignments that would encourage them to engage. Like, tell us about the 3 biggest competitors in your area. Tell us about the organizations, even nonprofits in your area you'd be interested in working with. And so giving them opportunities to convince you that your brand is going to work into their market. That opened up a lot of conversations and a lot of opportunities then for us to talk about why we were different than those brands, what set us apart, how we would succeed versus their competitors in the area. And so, I think having those touch points in between of, this two-way kind of sales funnel was really helpful. And those, our most successful franchisees, again, were the ones who were most engaged in the process prior to becoming franchisees.
Okay. Kelley, let's another level deeper. Let's talk about what was your approach on lead generation in terms of digital, brokers, organic? Oh, wait, before I get there, let me, it's a really good question. Love to hear more about the touch point ideas, right? So if you could dive into that a little, let's go from initial contact through those first conversations or beyond. What are the primary touch points you would recommend?
So, we always have obviously that initial touch point of, hey, thanks for reaching out. I'm so glad you found us. I typically wouldn't go straight into, let me tell you more about us. I'd say, I'm so glad you found us. Tell me about you. Because that would get people to start talking about them, about their hopes, what led them to you. And so I could come back then in my sales approach and target it toward them. Oh my gosh, that's amazing that you're a school teacher. Our brand definitely focuses on education in the following way. This is what a great possible alignment. And so getting people to talk about themselves early on in a way other than just fill out this application. We had a franchise application, you kind of have to. But that was kind of the first one, is tell me about you. So I could tell early on how I should be engaging with this person. But then throughout that process, from initial call to brand overview, we would actually have people talk to our different departments. They would get to talk to the ops team. They'd get an overview about the actual training from our training team. And each of those departments then got to ask questions. And I found it was really helpful because people coming from different perspectives in our company were asking a unique set of questions that we then could take all of that information and determine whether someone was a good fit. But some of those assignments were, again, like, who are your competitors? What organizations would you like to work with? What is, we had all the demographics, but we'd have them search for the demographics of their area too. And why do you think these fit well into our brand? And so, doing that throughout the process kept them engaged. And I get some feedback negatively sometimes too from people that were, listen, I have a full-time job. I don't have time to do this. Like, that's cool. I get that. So this maybe isn't right for you right now if you don't have the time to dedicate, and I think sometimes we can help people self-eliminate from the process too, which is an important part of it.
And then just on the follow-up, Kelley, about how the process interacted or tailored into Discovery Day.
Sure. So in the beginning, when our departments are giving kind of just overviews, so our ops team would talk a little bit about, here's the different service, the tools we use, the services with training, here are the different types of things we're offering on those calls. During Discovery Day, though, every department was all hands on deck. Discovery Days, I still get excited even thinking about Discovery Days. That was my favorite part of the whole process. But it was definitely each team came in and engaged. And then post Discovery Day, as a team, we would make decisions together on who we were inviting in as franchisees.
So Kelley, when you reflect on candidates that you lost or that would have been a great fit but didn't convert, where did you find where things went wrong or what was faulty or had to be improved?
Typically, where I think most people went south was post FDD disclosure. And, it's a couple reasons. I think at least initially, it's an overwhelming document, and a lot of people don't really know what they're getting into. Then you email them this document and they're like, okay, never mind. I didn't know it was this kind of contract. We would get, people kind of falling off their price, people kind of falling off once they saw the cost. So one of the things we did that I think really helped with that was creating it was a video that we would send out with the FDD. It was like, hey, watch this quick 3-minute video before you check out the FDD. And we'd say, hey, I know this is a huge document. Here's what you read the whole thing in its entirety, but here's what these sections mean. And here's how they relate to your business. And I think, kind of making it more, again, conversational before they even hopped into it helped. It was more laid back. And then we would do an FDD review with them after. And that was another opportunity where I would bring my team in, my ops team. Usually jumped on those calls as well. So they could also help field some questions from that.
All right. Kelley, because there's so many good topics, right? So I'm going to throw this out there. You pick the one where you think we should focus, right? CRM systems, pipeline fixes, ideal franchisee profiles, realistic sales goals. Where do you want to go?
I probably realistic sales goals.
Okay. Let's go.
Because I learned that lesson the hard way on two different sides of the spectrum, two entirely different sides of the spectrum. And so, I encourage people to realign or replace sales goals with support goals. Because I might have a sales goal of selling 20 franchise systems this year, but can I support 20 franchisees this year? Likely not. And those two things, I don't feel like people often sit back and think, do these actually align? And this is one of the reasons all departments working together, I think, is so important, because your sales team's going to be like, yeah, I can close 20, no problem. But if you ask your ops team if they can support 20, their answer is probably going to be different. And the second those don't align, you're in trouble. And so that actually happened to me. We hit a boom. I say starting out, I was like, I just want to sell one a year. And I didn't for the first 2 years. And that was soul crushing. So I understand that side of it. But then, once we were building up, we ended up selling 20 in a year. And it was amazing, but we couldn't support it. We didn't fail to support, but we had to turn off franchise development for almost 2 years after that to build back up, support all of these people as they should be, right? Our obligation is to the people in front of us, not to the people outside looking in. And so, I think it's important when we're looking at what our expectations are, that we're actually ready to support those. And that goes for early on franchisors too. Right when we finish that FDD, we're ready to start selling. But are the systems in place yet? Probably not. But do you even know what those systems need to be? Probably not. And so that's why I am such a fan of what what we're doing here at Internicola and what you've developed, Charles, is, making sure that people understand that launch isn't just the legal. Launch is making sure you have the systems in place to support people, and that, that will drive your pipeline as well.
Yeah. And I mean, to the greater thing of building enterprise value. Kelley, I'm curious, very curious, going from no franchise sales in the beginning to achieving franchise sales to accelerating at a very elite level. Looking back, what were the building blocks that got you from stage A to B and then to C?
The first thing we did after 2 years, 2 long years, was having someone help us tell our brand story. That's why I am such a firm believer. I mean, we had a really cool concept. I mean,
Right.
as far as concepts go, it's a pretty easy one to sell, but we didn't really have a story. We didn't have an identity. We weren't reaching the right people with our messaging. So that was our biggest turning point, was telling that story effectively, so people stayed engaged, right? Someone might click on it like, oh, this seems like a cool concept. And then, as you know, next time they're on Google, all of your competitors' ads are showing up too. Like, oh, this is a cool concept too. This is a cool concept too. These are all the same concept. Who has the best story? So I think that was a big thing for us. And then after that, I mean, it was bringing on like a professional digital marketing team, who helped us make sure we were getting leads, because that was, we were just kind of doing that sit and wait thing, which doesn't really work. We had tried a few shows, but especially early on, it's, again, what are you selling? Right. So I think that's the most important thing, is really understanding what we were selling and then getting the right leads in front of us.
When brand story, and it goes for any business, but, I think about the brands that over the years, they're not evolving. Like what their brand looked like 2 years earlier is what it looks like today. And then there's different mediums and tactics that they'll engage in, digital broker groups, but the needle doesn't move. And really the growth comes from within, and what you're about the brand story, the positioning, and then knowing you and your story, I could see why people were attracted. And then what a shame it would be to not tell that. Kelley, in terms of, which by the way, guys, everyone listening, our next Frank Camp is in September, and it's going to be all brand story focused and building out a playbook there. So definitely check that out. In terms of process itself, Kelley, well, a couple of things, right? So we have questions here. I mean, Diane brings up a good point about your earlier comment, which is, engaging with the candidates and also engaging with the spouse, right? Because if the spouse is not engaged, that's going to be a big red flag.
Absolutely.
Norman was asking about at what stage is it appropriate to share the FDD highlight video. So combining that together a little, talk about what to you like a good CRM process or a good automation looks like, and what are some key team players that new franchisors, emerging franchise brands should be relying on?
So, as far as our CRM went, I think there are so many automations we can set up that guide that sales funnel. And, for us, kind of to answer your question, Norman, for us, we didn't show the FDD until a lot later than I think a lot of brands do. And that was our choice. And I don't know that that's the choice for everyone. There's some brands I've met with it. They get the application, the FDD goes out. For us, it was about step 5. We had 2 assignments they had to do in there and 3 live conversations with us before they ever got the franchise, the FDD. And it's not that that I'm naive, that someone couldn't just find it and read it. It's nothing that I'm trying to hide or protect people from. I just wanted them to really understand the brand and have a commitment to reading the FDD. And so for us, it did come a little bit later. But a lot of these things, to Charles' point with CRM, were automated, right? As soon as we completed the call, we could check the box. And then that next email would go out inviting them to schedule the call with this person, or to complete this assignment, or to review this document. And so doing that made it a lot easier for us. And, that data like really being able to see where people are dropping off is invaluable. So, that was a really important process, was building that out. And, as far as, key people who were involved, a lot of ours was internally in the beginning. But, I mentioned we did use a marketing firm. We did use PR. We have worked with brokers. And so, I certainly am not anti-broker. We had some amazing success with some. I think it's better later than earlier on, just because it's really helpful but yeah, I'm sorry, that was a lot of information. But definitely having those automations is life-saving, especially, once your pipeline starts filling up.
So, and I think this topic's overlooked, Kelley. Franchisee persona, right? In terms of identifying the ideal franchisee. And once you do that, how that affects your messaging, how that affects your marketing, how that impacts your team. How did you approach that? Like, did you have an avatar you were focused on?
In the beginning, we did, and it was so wrong. Like, it could not have been more off on who we thought our ideal franchisee was. And so I still look back and think that's kind of amusing. And we struggled in the beginning because of it. And we tried, all of the things you can think of. We tried all of the different personality tests, all of the different, things that put people into boxes and tell you this is what this person is. These are their letters and numbers, and this is who you want as a franchisee. And that didn't really work for us. What worked a whole lot better for us was looking at who identified with our brand and marketing to them. And that was a little bit different. So, our brand was majority female owned. We're over 20% veteran owned, lots of educators. But so once we figured that out, and that those were the people that were actually coming in and building the brand the way we wanted it to be built, to your point, like Charles, our messaging totally changed. Not our brand story, not our mission, but who we were communicating to and how changed drastically. And that led to a huge increase in leads as well.
And at the same time, Kelley, did you have both pipelines going between digital or paid versus brokers? And did you see the same franchisee persona, or were you achieving the same results with brokers?
It's a good question. Yes, but I think one of the things for us, and I guess I should say for me personally, is if you're working with brokers, and again, I think there are some amazing broker networks, being really open and honest about here's who my persona is, and this is what I want to see. It's not always, super well received, right? Like, at the end of the day, like, their job is to bring you as many leads as possible. But, I think brokers actually really appreciate those open and honest conversations too about who they're looking for, because it increases their opportunity to close as well. And so I think, having those conversations early on, and whether it's brokers, whether it's your internal team, external sales team, like really everyone being on the same page of who you're looking for is really important.
I think that's a critical point for brokers, because I think too many franchisors approach it generically as if, we just want this broker to send all these leads, and so we're pretty much an open door. But I think that loses messaging to the brokers. You become less memorable to them. I think it shows integrity if you're very specific about the type of, because once you demonstrate that you're specific about who's a good fit for your brand, you're also communicating a very thoughtful discovery process. You're probably communicating also messaging on websites and other things that are going to create a really good transaction, a really good experience.
And that's what you want. I think, relationships with brokers, I know, but I don't think it's communicated well, should go beyond like, here's your money, here's my leads. If you want them to work well, we would host discovery days for brokers. So we'd actually have brokers come some in person and do in-person discovery days with us. Quarterly, we would do a digital discovery day with brokers. So anyone who wanted to come and learn more about our brand, like we would host it very similar to what we would for a franchisee. And it gave them the opportunity to actually understand our brand, understand who we're looking for. And, we had really great relationships with a lot of the brokers because of that.
When you would host quarterly discovery days with brokers, were there any moments that stuck out, like their breakthroughs for you in terms of they're really interested in these things? And I didn't think of that in terms of the brokers.
Yes. Obviously it should be, or should have been more obvious, but the item 19 is so important, right? But I think what's really important that we got to do in a discovery day that we wouldn't have otherwise with brokers is being able to really go through all of our products and services in detail. Because they're like, they start understanding, oh, here's all the ways people can generate income. It's not just this total dollar. Here's how all the opportunities that someone I present would have as income streams. That was a really big one. And the other one was really getting our mission across. Like you can talk about it, you can write it down, but when they got to see our team, see our passion, see what we were doing, I think it really helped them too when they had potential candidates coming to them that were looking for a passion-driven business or that were veterans and are really invested in the veteran community. And now they get to see how many veterans we work with, our team. Those sort of experiences, I think, really helped the brokers understand the mission of our brand too and bring the right people to us.
Yeah, I think it creates a ton of tangible behind the brand. It's interesting when we have our hot seats at FranCamp and whatnot. I love when brokers get involved because, to your point, one of the first things they're doing, they're reverse engineering the economic model, right? Okay, I get the sales, but where are what are the revenue channels or the categories? And so they're very focused on reverse engineering that economic story, which, a good indicator there is engineering your item 19 to be genuine and representative, but why not stay a step ahead and really engineer that economic story to communicate it? But it's always interesting how they jump into that. One of the questions, Kelley, was, and I think this is a good process question, about when you did the broker discovery days, did you have all leadership jump on the call, or did you do a presentation and whatnot?
That's good. So we did have a presentation we kind of went through, but most of it was talking. I say live, but via Zoom or in person. Typically it would be my department heads who would participate when available. And we always had at least one franchisee participate as well, because we wanted the broker to be able to participate in validation as well. And so we'd actually have a panel of 3 franchisees who would participate in these, and it would rotate, and the brokers would be able to kind of, just like you would on a validation call, talk to our franchisees about their experiences, ask questions that maybe we can't answer around financials and different things, and give them, not just our perspective, but the perspective of those people who have come on. And whenever possible, we would include a franchisee that had come from their network, so they could, kind of see that person came from their network, is now a franchisee, and can share their experience.
These all get to fundamentals, though, right? Because if you have that franchisee persona and you're building out your brand story and your messaging is aligned and you're indicating who is a good fit franchisee and who isn't, I think it makes the conversations more real. Broker discovery days, candidate discovery days. And I think that's where the opportunity for so many brands, no matter how big the brand is, that's where the deeper opportunity is.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it's all just one big, beautiful puzzle. And once it falls into place, it's great, but getting all the pieces right, it takes time. So you got to be patient with yourself for sure.
Kelley, I don't know if this is a legitimate question here. Nick Palace wants to know if the piano is real. But...
It is.
So Kelley, all right, so as we get close, and we're going to open up more questions, guys. If you have questions, and certainly come to FranCamp. Kelley will be there, and we're going to be doing a ton of good work there. Brand stories, sales funnels, and putting together solutions and playbooks. But Kelley, if we're talking top 3 fixes for franchise sales chaos, right? What would be things you're honing in on and focused on?
I've already said this like 10 times, but number one is, what is the story we're telling?
Right.
The brand story. 2, setting expectations for the sales funnel process. So 1, with our team, right? Like, what does our sales process look like? Mine was 11 steps, very clearly defined. These are the steps, but also making sure the potential franchisee understands those steps and allow for self-elimination based on those steps. And 3, I think this is probably not what any of you want to be thinking about right now, but is saying no to a deal also, I think, is one of the most important steps of the sales process. Is, I know everyone probably showed up here today like, how do I get all these leads and close all these deals? But if you're not willing to say no to the wrong deal, you're going to destroy your pipeline before it ever starts. And so, I think that probably the third is, having a process of being able to say, nope, this isn't the right deal, and walking away from a sale as well.
That's great. And then some other comments here, but like Hannah's point about including franchisees on calls with broker validation. What's your thoughts there, Kelley?
I think that was probably the most impactful thing we did for brokers, is them actually getting to see that we follow through, because brokers' reputations are on the line too. So I think that's a really good way to help make sure that they know we're keeping our commitments.
And then we have our friend Nick Powles. Again, this could be a serious question. What would you have done differently in the qualification process for franchise owners who eventually showed true colors and were not strong enough / good franchisees?
That is a really good question. Well, obviously, knowing who our ideal franchisee was in the beginning. I told you I made some huge missteps, and a lot of it was thinking we wanted to hire someone who wanted to work in the business and not on the business, right? So for us, someone who's really passionate about dogs maybe wasn't the right business owner. And so, kind of figuring out that process. But realistically, was having really clear expectations. That's why I go back to like putting so much work on the candidate in the beginning to prove they're willing to put in the work and meet your deadlines. And if you have a timeline, keep people to it. Because that was another thing we really struggled with, right? Is in the beginning, especially, like there's a lot going on, and it's easy to allow people to skip a step or allow people to not have to submit this thing, and that will snowball. And so, setting expectations early is definitely something I would have changed.
Well, to Nick's question, to Scott's point, and to yours, I mean, as legal counsel, boy, walking away from the wrong franchisee will save you time, money, future enterprise value, and headaches, right? Because you're not only dealing with a problematic franchisee or bad culture fit, you're dealing with the attorneys they hire later on, and you really need to protect your system. And it's not about legal protection per se, that's there. But if you could avoid those bad fit franchisees, you'll be doing a world of good. Krista's question, any recommendations, part-time, salespeople? So Kelley, what should the cycle look like? Founder-driven franchise brand. I'm scaling up to, different stages of growth. I had a call yesterday. It was Charles, hey, our corporate locations are doing great. Our new franchisees are doing great. We're thinking about a salesperson. What should franchisors be thinking about for staffing that initial team? And now I'm going beyond founder-led to what type of person do I bring in on franchise sales, and how do we go about it?
Yeah, so one of the questions I always ask people is, what job do you want that salesperson to do? Right? If it's educating people about your brand, if it's getting people passionate about your brand and excited, is an outside salesperson actually the best person to do that? In my opinion, probably not. But your director of ops might be super passionate about what you're doing. Your field trainer might be super passionate about what you're doing and can educate people. If you just need the closer, why? Why are they not, self-closing? Why is the discovery day not closed? So I encourage people to kind of look at your team and, what can't they do that you want the salesperson to do? For me personally, it was like, I need leads. So I didn't need a salesperson. I needed a strong marketing team that got the right people in front of me. And then I was confident my team could guide them through that process. There are organizations and there are salespeople out there. There's, some great kind of companies that will just work with smaller organizations. But at the end of the day, it's about getting your brand story to the right people. And so I think a lot of people more often need marketing support than sales support, and kind of doing that evaluation can be helpful.
And I like that. I think it holds true for any business, which your point is, if you can build your sales team in-house, right? Because they're your team, they're aligned on culture, they're aligned on passion, and you could teach them the franchise sales process, right? And those are so many things we're focused on at FranCamp and Good Spark, but I think that's critical because these outside salespeople, they're great and at a certain level, but they don't understand what brought the brand to where it's at. And I think that's a good opportunity. And we've seen with so many clients, team members that were on operations support before the brand even became a franchise. And then they go on their journey of learning franchising, learning sales, but the connection between that person that they have with the founder, leadership team, brand, I don't think you could replace that. The other thing I also see are emerging brands where sometimes they feel like I'm going to import some high-level executive talent, and it turns out to be hollow, right? It's a lot of form over substance, and I think franchise brands need to be careful there.
I agree.
We have a bunch of questions. I don't want to leave anyone out. This is important. What strategies have you seen work best when balancing sales with post-sales onboarding and support, especially when you're wearing multiple hats?
A lot of time management and understanding what it takes for each sale and each onboarding. When I started 12 years ago, it wasn't as easy as it is now. I didn't have the option to go on and say, okay, I'm spending roughly 4 hours on this and on this to chat GPT and tell me how many hours I have left in my week for onboarding and support. I had a spreadsheet and it was ugly, but it worked. I think that's just depending on your brand and what that onboarding looks like. Is obviously there's going to be some variation, but this is why I'm a firm believer, and I do have my development, kind of outline that I've used in the past, and I'm happy to share with anyone that wants to see it. But that is a big reason of why I like to include so many different team members and departments in the sales process as well. So we didn't have that bottlenecking that all the sales had to happen with me. Nothing could happen unless I did it. And then I passed them off to this person. Now they're solely responsible. It kind of kept the flow where everyone was engaged, throughout multiple steps in the process.
I think involving the team, and I know this question is about someone wearing multiple hats, but when you involve the team, then there's buy-in and there's obligation. So everyone understands what we're obligated to do for the franchisee. I think for newer brands where you're wearing multiple hats, I think you need to be practical about that and recognize where your capacity is, what's your budget for adding team members and support, and honoring that investment and really understanding the future of your whole franchise system is going to rest on that franchisee validation and their unit economics, right?
Yeah. And I think the one place, the hat you're probably wearing that you need to remove, and it was true for me, was my local business. I had, like most emerging franchisors, I had my local business, and then I decided to franchise. But I was so used to being the operator of this local business. And so I think where people ask me, where do I hire first? You hire someone to run and manage your local business so you can focus entirely on franchising. Because I think that's where people really lose track of kind of the mission and get discouraged, just because they're not fully invested in the franchise side.
This question is interesting because at first I'd say no, but it gets very interesting. Would you have reversed the qualification process and gone to their market? Seeing how they behave in their backyard shows a ton of insight. And if we invested a little more in saying yes, as in going to them, we may see more good and bad in the process. Is this achievable? What's your thoughts there, Kelley?
That's interesting. That's a great question, Nick. I actually had never considered that. But I do absolutely see the value in it. I again, like, am big into investing in people that we want to invest in us. So I think, that's wonderful. We found ourselves with a lot of discovery days where we would have multiple people coming from multiple markets, and that might have been difficult. I loved discovery days that had, 3 or 4 groups from different markets. It was good for conversation. But I love this idea of, being able to go see them. I guess depending on what your brand is, for us, it was really important that people got to experience the brand. So we would take them out on training appointments. They'd go to client homes. They'd get to be our brand for a day. But I definitely see a lot of value in this for brands that are able to do that.
And Nick's point is, it's very interesting for emerging brands, right? For if you're out of the gate, those first 5, 10 franchisees are so critical. That's an interesting investment, right?
Especially if you don't have a building yet, you don't have the place to you really, do this, right? I think that's a fantastic suggestion.
This is a great question. I love this topic. We're early in our franchise journey. How do you recommend balancing broker partnerships with building an internal sales team?
Well, I typically have people consider waiting to add a broker network until they have at least 5 franchisees. And, a lot of that is just because we want to build out our systems. We want to make sure, those first 5 franchisees, we're going to learn a lot from them, probably just as much as they learn from us. And there's a few reasons for that. One, just like practicality, we pay a lot of money to broker networks. In the beginning, you need a lot of that money to invest back into your business. If you're a typical emerging franchise system, you need that money then to build out the support systems, build out the systems, go out to their locations, do their grand opening. So that's kind of the practical side of it. But also, like, on the broker side, again, working with so many brokers, I try to look at their perspective too. You could pretty easily butcher a relationship with a broker by not supporting the franchisees that they're giving you well. And so, in the beginning too, you want to make sure you've built out that system and have a proven system of support. Because if you start working with these networks and you let down the people they're sending, they aren't successful, you aren't giving the services promised, and you get blacklisted by these broker networks, you're going to put yourself, in a bad position moving forward. And so, early on, I think as much as you can focus in-house and building the processes with those first 5 franchisees, the better you're going to be.
So I think this question indicates a bunch of things, and we see this with the emerging brands, right? Balancing broker partnership with internal sales team. I don't think they're mutually exclusive. The question is, when do you need that internal sales team? And then the bigger question, I think, when I look at emerging brands are you ready for broker partnerships, and are you ready for digital, right? So to your point, Kelley, I agree. Usually we ask our clients to stage their entrance into a broker network. Why? Because brokers want to see unit economics and franchisee validation. And if you just join without that, you're going to have a disadvantage in the broker networks, right? Maybe you want to join early to gain insights, see what other franchisors are doing. But I agree with your strategy of having 5 franchisees, or if you're going to scale in earlier, be strategic. Where I think emerging brands get stuck, they think, okay, I joined a broker network, and so now that's going to fulfill my sales. Or I have an internal sales team, or I'm working with salespeople, that's going to fulfill my sales. But they're not looking at the package, the product we're selling, right? Which gets to your points earlier. Usually we'll look at the website. It's generic, no brand story. Franchise sales process, it's not founder-led. It's really generic there too. And so now when they have conversations with brokers, or they're running paid ads and leads are coming in for the sales team, there's nothing amplifying that conversion or that conversation. So, to this comment, I would say this question sort of maybe puts the cart before the horse, because 9 out of 10 times, especially for emerging brands, they enter the broker networks and people have you at their regional conferences and they'll have you at their annual conferences. But, your story may not be there. And if you're a gym and you go to a broker conference and say you're a great gym or whatever product, you're not going to gain attention, right? So I don't think they're mutually exclusive. You want in all of the above, but I would challenge, maybe you should look at your brand assets, and what's spinning and telling that story. Krista's comment, we need leads, we need help with a broker lead gen system. I'm going to jump ahead there. Krista, I think you probably do, but I don't know if the foundation's going to be there yet. Brand story, really understanding where we're at. Although Krista, I know, operates at a very high level. And for Krista, I would strongly recommend, like, that's where come to Frank Camp and engage with other franchisors. They're going to be sharing stories of what worked, what didn't, where they spent money on lead gen or paid leads or broker groups, and what's getting the breakthroughs. So I think those are important points there for sure. And guys, if Kelley will be there, come to Frank Camp. Our next event, September 8 to 10. It's going to be amazing. And it's not conference, it's boot camp. And it's designed to solve problems as we go forward and to get that momentum and flywheel going. Kelley, you're going to lead us out. Any last words here for everyone? And by the way, guys, everyone who's on this live stream, thank you. I love having you guys here. And any questions, if you're a client of the firm or you want to find out about Frank Camp, reach out to Kelley. We're always glad to help out.
Yeah, guys, thanks so much for coming today. I mean, the biggest thing is don't give up. Like, your next big break is just around the corner, and, lean on our community. That's what we're here for. So I hope to have lots of conversations with all of you in the future.
Yeah. And check your email next month. We're going to have another live stream. Have a great weekend, everyone.